reduced disease burdens in people, not only for zoonoses, but because of improved nutrition? What if because we were able to make animals live in environments where they can't currently live, we could increase the amount of protein to animals? That's fine and good. What about human medicine itself? 68% of all of the chronic diseases in the developed world are due to dysfunctions of the immune system. Over 70% of all of the mortality and morbidity in the developing world are due to immune dysfunction. What kind of animals are we using to test immunological systems in? Rats and mice. How concordant are those studies for assessing either the effectiveness of treatment or pathogenesis in humans? Why is the NIH spending so much money, pouring money into rat and mouse research, which are wonderful early research tools, but really lousy development tools?
So at this point,
so I'm going to finish up. I know I'm on a soapbox. Just relax. The kitties will be fed.
This is the danger of comfy chairs. I'm realizing.
The kitties will be fed. So how do we deal with these things in terms of risk assessment up front? Well, what we try to do is ask risk questions rather than going through a risk checklist. And what we build into the entire approval process is what we refer to as a durability plan. Someone talked to the durability of the response the other day. And so what we have is based on the manufacturing process, we have the ability to go in, ensure the durability of these animals with respect to safety, and to pull them back.
So actually, just picking out a couple of things from that, which I think are important. One is the aspect of problem framing. So you actually work out what your problem is in the first place and how you can actually frame that in a way in which you can make progress. And very clearly this is getting into the sociological side of things, but poor framing can lead to people going down an unhelpful avenue, and good framing can actually help them make progress. The second aspect actually that I think is interesting is taking the approach of working out how to ask the right questions when it comes to risk, rather than, as you say, having that checklist. And that seems to be an approach where you begin to be able to look at emerging issues and work out what the right questions are you should be asking about those emerging issues to take action. And I want to come back to you, Adam, and I'm treating you as the conventional risk assessment expert here, not that that's particularly fair, but but do you see here as a potential route from going from how we have done things in the past with risk assessment to how we can actually transport that knowledge and understanding to emerging risks by working out how we identify early warnings and begin to ask the right questions?
Well, I mean, yes and no, in the sense that I guess I want to push back a little bit against the actual title of the panel and the notion that the right question is framed in the form of managing emerging risks, because I have come to think that we in the risk assessment world have been sort of set free and left disconnected from the decision analysis world, and that we have to sort of reunite. We have to break down that firewall that was put in place many years ago. So I would say it's more about while I agree that notions of problem formulation and putting risks in context and life cycle risk and cumulative risk are all better than the older way of one risk at a time and ignoring those things, I think the whole idea of problem formulation misses the chance to do solution formulation. So it's managing emerging opportunities, trying to increase again, this gets back to the commonality problem and the double-edged sword of even talking this way, but trying to increase social welfare through parenthetical risk-reducing, closed paren innovations that may be motivated by risk reduction potential, but that may not be. And so to ask, what's the problem? And then
I guess to ask what the problem is, you've already assumed there is a problem rather than having that mindset of thinking about solutions.
It's part that, and it's part, I think, as soon as you define the problem, as soon as you begin to go down the road of defining the problem, then you foreclose certain solutions that you don't even really appreciate that you foreclosed. If it's what's the lowest volatile organic content of paint to put on airplanes that then have to be stripped with something and then repainted. If you define it as dialing down the VOC content problem, you'll get one set of discussion about products. If you define it as the how do we get people from here to there problem, you might start to think about ways to save weight and fuel by not necessarily doing the same thing to the outside of the plane.
Presumably another way of looking at it is to talk about integrative approaches. So rather than be straitjacketed in terms of your thinking, in terms of problem space, solution space, you're far more integrated. And that's certainly an approach that I've seen from the reinsurance industry. I don't know whether you want to say anything about that, Brian, but you're working in an industry that has to make hard-headed decisions. You can't afford to be caught up in dogmas or straitjackets. You've got to find the best possible solution from wherever it comes from. Is that a fair thing to say, which, to my mind, seems to indicate that you're forced to be integrative in your thinking when it comes to solutions?
Well, I think you have to respond to your customers, and it's kind of interesting in just looking at the Swiss Re website today, not that I had any involvement in this, but we just provided cover for working women in Haiti for cholera related to the idea that that's a significant exposure for them, and a lot of the working women are the primary breadwinners within that society. So having some economic compensation if they get sick and can't work is a way not to eliminate the risk, but perhaps to deal with some of the downstream economic consequences associated with it. It's a free market situation, so our assessment of risk can be different from the assessment of risk of other reinsurers. And as a result, our clients aren't looking at one solution. They may be looking at multiple solutions and different economic situations associated with each of those. I think the one guiding principle, though, for our clients is that they want to be working with a reinsurer who maintains their solvency, will be down there in the future to pay claims and obligations that they're committing to now.
Yes, Adam.
We were provoked earlier this morning, so I'm just picking up on what you're saying, and it draws a parallel in my mind, and I hope you'd agree with the predicate here. I assume that your company and those like it wouldn't exist, let alone be able to turn a little profit, unless there were people out there who, through essentially the randomness of life, paid more in premiums than they ever got back in claims. And they are doing that for their own self-interest, but also knowing that they might be in the other category of people who ended up paying less in premiums than they received in claims. And I think that's been working very well for a very long time, but I'm nervous about the breakdown of that sort of social compact. I think, again, looking domestically, the number of people who are tolerant of ever being on the wrong side of one of those lotteries is getting less and less. I think it's the sort of instant gratification for free mentality that I think a significant minority of people are starting to win the day in terms of tax rates and in terms of entitlements. And unless we're willing to understand that risk is all about the management of uncertain future events, and that again, the commonality is a double-edged sword, but the commons about being in this together and tolerating that somebody might actually take something out of my paycheck and put it somewhere where it could be used for all kinds of things, including better clinical trials and including better post-market, all that stuff that Alta talks about. A lot of it sounded great to me, and I'm thinking, where's the money going to come from to fund that stuff if we're starving the beast? So.
Well, I think user fees are something that, we're talking about business models, about how one mitigates risks. And I think often one thinks of user fees as mitigating the risk of the return on investment as part of the product development.
Are you thinking of user fees in a specific context or
I'm
for
thinking
generally?
about user fees for the FDA to use to review submissions for approval for medical devices, therapeutic aids of various sorts.
Yeah.
We don't spend so much time, and again, I'm not an expert in any of this, but, Alta was talking about whether or not we had sufficient statutory authority to do the post-market surveillance. I guess the question that I have to follow on Adam's point is, do we have sufficient resources at hand to do the kind of post-market surveillance that we might need to? And in the course of doing our next round of user fees, do we want to also encourage, instead of shorter turnaround times, perhaps expanding the ability of the agency to do more horizon spanning and to understand better what the risks out there might be in the future?
Just as a matter of interest, how effective are federal agencies at the moment on horizon scanning? And you've used the term a couple of times. In the context of trying to see what's coming down the pike. Are we good at it?